Short video is going to touch on some of the issues for transgender women in prison in Queensland. Basically, the position for transgender women in Queensland is that under our transgender offender procedures, a person is sorted into prison based on their genitalia. This is similar in other states of Australia. The problem with this is that many trans women, particularly trans women who don't have a great deal of money in Australia, cannot afford certain types of surgery, including so-called bottom surgery or gender affirmation surgery or genital surgery, all names for a similar process. This surgery can cost tens of thousands of dollars even and is not particularly covered under Medicare, though some procedures may be. This means that there are particularly vulnerable women of colour, women who are sex workers and others who happen to be trans women who have not had genital surgery or who don't want genital surgery. Not all trans women actually want genital surgery or can have it due to health concerns. Those women will be placed in a male prison. So effectively they're imprisoned with men, even though they may have had many years of hormone therapy or partial surgeries, such as breast augmentation surgeries, which are actually, interestingly, more accessible, both financially and under Medicare. Those women are at substantial risk in a male prison because some male prisoners will treat them as women, and some male prisoners have a history of sexual assault and dangerous behaviour towards women. There have been studies in both the US, Australia and the UK that show that transgender women in prisons are at extraordinarily high risk of sexual assault. Some US studies have found that 100% of trans women in some jurisdictions have been sexually assaulted while in jail. And in some circumstances, transgender women assume that they must find a protector in jail or be repeatedly assaulted. I've seen documentaries interviewing trans women who've said that. This has led to legal challenges in both WA and Queensland. In WA, a woman known as CJ Palmer was arrested, charged in relation to passing HIV to an ex-partner. She was also a sex worker. She was a trans woman, and she was, due to her status as a trans woman who had not had genital surgery, she was placed in a male prison. Her initial sentence was for 6 years, and the only management process that they had for her in prison was to place her in solitary confinement. So effectively, a solitary confinement of originally up to 6 years. Her sentence was reduced, but she still did end up in jail for some years in solitary confinement. When she was first in jail, there were also concerns that she was not receiving appropriate medical care, including hormones. Another prisoner, Leilani Tafau, actually made a discrimination complaint against Queensland prisons and Serco, who ran the prison in which she was placed. She was placed in a male prison and repeatedly referred to as he and him and treated as a man. She had started hormone replacement therapy as a 15-year-old and was now almost 40. So had had a long history of female hormones and living as a woman, because she is a woman. Unfortunately, that didn't prevent her from being sent to a male prison. One of the comments of prison staff was that no one with a penis will ever be sent to a women's prison in Queensland, leaving the QCAT member who heard the discrimination matter to assume that Leilani had a penis. There was no direct evidence of this, and there was also no direct evidence that Leilani would pose any sort of a risk to other women because she had a penis. The assumption appears to have been that people with penises are automatically dangerous. Which of course is not true of people with penises, whether they are trans women or cis men. Though some men and some people with penises more generally can be assailants of others. That is not an automatic presumption. So Leilani was placed in a male prison. She was repeatedly referred to as he and him and was listed as a male prisoner. She was seeking to have that approach removed, but the prison's management claimed that it was necessary for her safety to refer to her as a man, and that she had basically caused the need for the way she was being treated in prison through being a flirtatious person. The QCAT member actually agreed with that and allowed the prison and the system to continue to refer to her as a man, even though she had female identity markers on all of her documents and had previously, in fact, been in a female prison in New Zealand. She was in prison not for violent or sexual offences, but rather for a fraud offence. There are no appropriate places for women like CJ Palmer and Leilani Tafau in Australian prisons. The presumption that a person with a penis is automatically dangerous to other women prisoners is somewhat problematic. In addition, if a person has not undergone surgeries before they enter prison, they will not be allowed to access them. They will also not be allowed to access hormone therapy if they have not previously undergone hormone therapy before entering prison. So for trans people who either had no resources to access therapy or came to a realization that they were trans while in prison, and that can happen. There's studies that show that trans people have several phases of their life where people commonly realize that they're trans. And that can include early childhood, the teen years, and for a significant proportion of trans people as an adult are in their 20s and older. So for all of these reasons, our transgender prisoner procedures are quite problematic. What about trans guys? Anecdotally, trans guys are often placed in women's prisons. Many trans men do not have bottom surgery. It's often not as successful as bottom surgery for trans women in relation to sexual functionality. In addition to that, for the same reasons that many women may not have bottom surgery, trans guys may have health issues, monetary issues, and other reasons not to have bottom surgery. So many of those people are identified as women because of their genitalia, even though they are men. And some prefer to be placed in men's prisons or identify as butch lesbians to be placed in women's prisons, because the danger levels for a person with a vulva in a man's prison is very high. So, but that's only anecdotally. There are relatively few studies done looking at trans guys going to prison. So that's the issues for trans people in prisons in Queensland.